As part of his Confederate division's eastward movement through Adams and York counties in south-central Pennsylvania, Jubal Early was joined by a contingent of Virginia horse soldiers, including the 17th Cavalry under William French and the 35th Battalion, commanded by Elijah White. After advancing through Gettysburg on June 26, 1863, Early prepared to deploy John Gordon's infantry brigade eastward to the city of York. Simultaneously, Early dispatched White to southern York County as one means of inflicting harm upon infrastructure of military value across the region. Per a meeting with Corps Commander Richard Ewell, Early stated that one of his instructions was to cross the South Mountain to Gettysburg and then proceed to York and cut the Northern Central Railroad, the primary train line running from Baltimore to Harrisburg. As such, on June 27th, Early reported, "I directed Colonel White to proceed with his cavalry to Hanover Junction on the Northern Central Road, destroying the railroad bridges on the way, and to destroy the junction and a bridge or two south of it, and then proceed to York, burning all the bridges up to that place." At Hanover Junction, the generally north-south oriented Northern Central met the east-west oriented Hanover Branch Railroad, which ran from the junction westbound through Hanover and ultimately ended at Gettysburg. With a wagon train full of captured supplies in tow, the main body of the Confederate Cavalry Corps pestered villages and towns during Jeb Stuart's famous raid, many along the Hanover Branch. Now that the remainder of Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia was in Pennsylvania, troops like those under White could concentrate on seizing intersections with other railroads, such as Hanover Junction. Defending the junction against a pending rebel attack were 3 companies of the 20th Pennsylvania Volunteer Militia, which just crossed the Codorus Creek. The unit, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel William Sickles, was comprised of 225 soldiers out of the 7,000 who answered Governor Andrew Curtin's call for emergency troops during the invasion of the Commonwealth that June. In anticipation of the Confederate cavalry's approach, Sickles posted skirmishers northwest of Hanover Junction, with the primary line of the 20th Militia closer to the intersection. On a hill east of the junction, the lieutenant colonel purportedly placed a single cannon for limited artillery support. At about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on June 27th, White's 150 hollering mounted cavalrymen wildly galloped towards Sickles' position, a prime example of the nickname the unit soon earned, White's Comanches. Much like the 26th Pennsylvania Emergency Militia at Gettysburg a day earlier, the 20th Militia crumbled at the mere threat of contact with the enemy. The untrained citizen soldiers retreated across the narrow gorge in which the junction is situated and withdrew eastward toward the hill on which their lone cannon rested. There, they paused at their fresh fortifications, looking down upon White's battalion as the rebel horse soldiers destroyed and burned portions of the railroad, cars, and telegraph equipment. Eventually, the Pennsylvanians pulled out of Hanover Junction, soon to join other militiamen east of York at Wrightsville on June 28th. There, Lieutenant Colonel Sickles would be captured with some of his men in defense of the imperative Susquehanna River crossing. Likewise, Elijah White's 35th Battalion of Virginia Cavalry rejoined the remainder of Jubal Early's Confederate division and was engaged at Wrightsville as well. Early was satisfied with his mounted troops' accomplishments, but wished they might have achieved more before returning to the infantry near York. According to Early's official report after the Gettysburg campaign, Colonel White succeeded in reaching Hanover Junction and destroying the depot and also 1 or 2 bridges in the vicinity. But he did not, however, destroy all the bridges between that point and York, as he reported that 1 or 2 of them were defended by an infantry force. To finish White's incomplete tasks, Early assigned William French's 17th Virginia Cavalry, which had already destroyed crossings over the Conewago Creek, a tributary to the Susquehanna River, which runs through Adams and York counties. On the heels of French's success, said Early, I sent him to destroy the remaining bridges over the Codorus Creek, between York and Hanover Junction, which he succeeded in doing, any force which may previously have been defending them having disappeared. As a result of the Confederate raids at Hanover Junction and elsewhere, regional travel by rail was temporarily halted. Before and during the Battle of Gettysburg, this slowed or ceased the transport of supplies on behalf of the United States Army. Likewise, evacuation of wounded soldiers from the battlefield and its hospitals was hindered for several days. When the damage was repaired and the situation improved, from early July through the remainder of the summer of 1863, thousands of patients were eventually transported out of Gettysburg's train depot to Hanover Junction, from which they were sent to larger military hospitals at Pennsylvania cities like Philadelphia, Harrisburg, York, and the likes of Baltimore and Washington. Another effect of White's raid at Hanover Junction was the temporary interruption of its telegraph line, which, as was typical in the 19th century, ran alongside the railroad. This inconvenience disabled not only civilian communication, but also correspondence amongst U.S. military personnel as they pursued Lee's army in Pennsylvania. On the morning of July 1st, as the Battle of Gettysburg began, for instance, a telegraph operator named Joseph Kirby located Brigadier General John Buford west of the town to set up a temporary telegraph line since one did not exist, and Kirby subsequently scouted positions for placing the line from the cupola of the Lutheran Seminary. When telegraph lines were eventually repaired and returned to service, one of the first dispatches received at the city of Hanover, 15 miles southwest of Hanover Junction, was from none other than Abraham Lincoln, who was famously keeping up on news of the battle. 4.5 months later, a set of famous photographs was captured here. The occasion was the arrival of Lincoln's train as the president passed through the junction en route to Gettysburg. One of the photos has sparked an age-old debate as to whether Lincoln himself appears in the image. Fewer than 24 hours after having passed through Hanover Junction on November 18, 1863, President Lincoln took the speaker's stand at Soldiers National Cemetery for the dedication of the United States Veterans Burial Ground and the delivery of his legendary Gettysburg Address. The primary buildings which were here in 1863 still stand today, including the refurbished hotel and depot, now joined by historical and commemorative wayside markers, plaques, cannon tubes, and a bust of Abraham Lincoln. The site is accessible along modern Route 616, southwest of the borough of Seven Valleys, about 11 miles south of York and 30 miles east of Gettysburg. Another popular way to explore Hanover Junction is by hiking and biking the York County Heritage Rail Trail, a 21-mile long path along neighboring railroad tracks from York to the Mason-Dixon line.